When we see that today rustic style breads are getting popular again and that consumers are looking for breads with taste, breads that are more healthy for them, we have to go back in time and realize that sourdough is the oldest ingredient that has been used in bread baking. It exists for thousands of years. Only the last 150 years it disappeared a little bit because commercial yeast made its entrance in the market. Now for rye breads we know that you need sourdough in order to be able to make the bread bakeable, but for wheat breads there is this whole revival of this ancient method of baking with sourdough, and that has only benefits when it comes to the taste of the bread. It gives the bread a nice texture, and on top of that it makes the bread more digestible. I was lucky enough to be able to taste some Polish bread when I arrived. My colleagues took me to a couple of bakeries where I could discover the typical rye bread. We visited a couple of these bakeries, and then we also visited one of these new bakeries that opened during the pandemic, where I tasted a really amazing bread with poppy seeds inside. It had a fantastic crust. It's a bread that I could eat every day. I was very happy to see that also here in Poland you have this revival of breads with body, with character and with lots of flavor. How to recognize a good bread when it's on the shelf, when the bread has a beautiful crust, when the color is okay, when it's not baked too black or when it's too pale. The most important is to touch the bread, to see if it's crusty or if it's soft, to smell it, to discover the flavors, a bit like you do with a glass of wine. You look at the color, you look at the rim, you smell the aromas, and then finally you taste it. So breads that are on the shelf should look good first to start with, and then later on it's the whole discovery of tasting them that should be just an amazing experience. Sourdough actually is very simple. Everyone can make that. It is just a blend of flour and water that every day you add more flour and water to it until after 5, 7, 10 days you have something that smells a little bit like yogurt, where you have the microorganisms that are inside have developed flavors and acids and alcohol and CO2 to make the bread rise. So that is the initial objective of a sourdough, is to make the bread rise and to develop flavors. During that process, you start actually to transform the proteins into amino acids, which are essential building blocks for our body. Making a sourdough, everyone can do that. But once you have the sourdough, it behaves a bit like a human being or a pet. It has its own life, it needs to be fed, and depending on how this is done and in which temperature and in which conditions, you will see fluctuations. That is the complexity. The simplicity of making sourdough is actually very complex. I am the sourdough librarian. There is only one sourdough library in the world, in Belgium, where we do 3 things. It is a non-for-profit initiative of the company to contribute to the world of fermentation and fermentation technology, and we preserve the biodiversity of sourdough by analyzing and isolating the microorganisms that we find in there, and we keep them in a freezer at -80 degrees. We protect the heritage of bakery because when we get a sourdough, we document it with all the information that the bakery or the person where it comes from gives us. And last but not least, we have the physical sample of the sourdough in the library to offer a backup in case something goes wrong in the place of origin, where the baker might lose the sourdough due to a fire, due to a flooding, whatever. And so for the moment we have 137 sourdoughs in the collection, coming from 25 countries. In Europe we have 1 from Poland yet. I hope in the future to see more. We have French sourdoughs, Italian sourdoughs, from Japan, from Australia, from Peru, from Brazil.